Hello everyone and welcome to this APUSH review session. Here is everything that you need to know about the coronavirus pandemic of 2019. So here's just some basic vocabulary for you to write down in your notes and remember as we go through this PowerPoint. Firstly, a pandemic, which is when a disease is prevalent over an entire country or the whole world. In this case, it was the entire world. A novel virus, which is a new virus that has never been previously identified. In a virus, which basically is an extremely small infective agent that multiplies within the cells of a host organism. So here's our learning target for today that you can write down in your notes as well. I will be able to identify the problems and the positive things that arose during the COVID-19 pandemic. I know this isn't science class, but to understand a pandemic, you have to understand what caused it. So what exactly is coronavirus? Coronavirus 2019, often called COVID-19, is an infectious disease, and it's caused by the virus SARS-CoV-2, or Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. This specific strain of coronavirus was a novel virus. Other strains of coronavirus had been found to cause just the common cold in the past, but this one was new, and no one had adaptive immunity against it. No one had ever had it before, so no one's immune systems could fight it off. SARS-CoV-2 was around 10 times deadlier than the average flu. The virus first began to emerge in December of 2019, and the origin is unknown. So as a result of the virus, people were forced to quarantine and start social distancing. The virus spreads mainly from person to person, through droplets produced when an infected person coughs or sneezes. These droplets can be inhaled by people that are within close contact of that person, which is around 6 feet. In order to try to prevent the spread of the virus, the entire world went into quarantine. Any non-essential businesses were closed, so were schools, churches, anything, and people were encouraged to stay in their homes. Social distancing protocols were enforced to keep people staying 6 feet away from others, and the public were highly encouraged, or in certain places mandated, to wear a mask. Admittedly, the main problem that arose during this pandemic is the one that we're going to hit on the least. But it should go without saying that in the middle of any pandemic, the biggest problem is that people are getting sick and they're dying in massive numbers. People with underlying conditions, such as diabetes or heart disease, were at higher risk from not recovering from the virus. And the elderly and those with autoimmune diseases were at higher risk as well, making it especially dangerous. Children getting COVID-19 also started getting Kawasaki disease, which is an inflammatory disease that was their body's natural response to COVID-19, which made it even more dangerous for them. Obviously, there were some societal issues, and those were the big things we're going to hit on. Our healthcare system was completely overwhelmed. Because of America's private healthcare system, the states and different hospital systems were all competing each other to get supplies. Bigger states, bigger hospitals, ones with more money could outbid others, and that caused massive problems. There was a shortage of important equipment like ventilators and PPE, or personal protection equipment, and this made it difficult to treat all patients, coronavirus patients, and just general patients. Convention centers and stadiums had to be converted to field hospitals to be able to treat everyone, as you can see in this picture. The economic effects in America of the coronavirus was detrimental. The economy essentially shut down. Businesses were forced to lay off workers or even close permanently. The virus caused an historic effect on labor. Unemployment rates were the highest they've been since the Great Depression. In April 2020, the unemployment rate was 14.7%. In April 2020, some states also saw the highest unemployment rates they had ever seen. Stimulus packages were sent out to every American citizen of a maximum of $1,200. And then, in addition, other benefits were added to certain groups to try to combat the economic problem. Obviously, there were some psychological issues that affected Americans. Humans are designed to be social beings. They're not designed to be in isolation. Universally, every person's behavior is driven by 5 different things: their need for belonging, understanding, controlling, enhancing self, and trusting. The pandemic challenged these motives for essentially everyone, making the time much more difficult and confusing. People were lost, confused, panicking, and angry, and this caused people to do some things they normally wouldn't do, or some things that, looking back, seem pretty crazy. One such thing was people started hoarding toilet paper in an attempt to control the situation. Isolation was also especially damaging for those already dealing with mental illnesses, such as depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. The media. Overall, news coverage of the virus was good and kept Americans well informed. More Americans were tuning into nightly news, and it was a good way to make sure that everyone knew what was happening. However, there were also a dark side to it. Social media was used by some to spread misinformation, and this misinformation caused an increase in the mistrust of the government and the facts. Crazy theories spread that caused people to do even crazier things. One theory spread that said that 5G was the source of the coronavirus. In the UK, people were burning down cell towers, so here in the US, we had to start protecting them, and telecom companies had to start creating plans to make sure the towers didn't get burnt down. Racism and xenophobia was a massive issue. There wasn't enough factual evidence to prove it, but many people believed that the virus originated in Wuhan, China. And another one of those crazy theories that circulated was that China had created it as a bioweapon to attack the US. These theories fueled anti-Asian racism and xenophobia worldwide. Asians and people of Asian descent were targets of many physical attacks and a downpour of hateful rhetoric in the media from politicians, celebrities, and everyday people. As I said earlier, there was a massive spread of misinformation, and this caused many people to have a distrust in the government and the facts. They started thinking that the virus wasn't that serious or wasn't that important, and that we needed to open back up, and that all the actions being taken were unnecessary. So many Americans disagreed with these actions, and they started to protest. They believed that their constitutional rights were being infringed upon, and they protested everything from being told to wear a mask, businesses closing, abortion clinics staying open, churches closing, developing a vaccine, and etc. Protests are obviously a constitutional right as long as they're peaceful, but in this case they were dangerous and rash, as they just helped spread the virus more and delayed the opening of all the things they were protesting. Social issues. The virus disproportionately affected racial and ethnic minority groups. Members of the homeless community were also especially vulnerable because of the crowded shelters and pre-existing conditions, and they couldn't abide by a stay-at-home order. And not everyone has equal access to health care. Those living in poverty or members of the LGBTQ+ community were some that were at risk for not receiving or having access to adequate care. This is a problem that's always been a problem, but in a time of a pandemic, it's especially dangerous. The positives. Obviously, there were so many negative things, but for the sake of history not always having to be bad, let's talk about some of the positive things. People still found ways to come together in a time of social distancing and quarantining. Virtual parties, proms, and graduations were held, and celebrities used their platforms to spread positivity and raise money to fight the virus, along with just the general public doing the same. Here is a picture of an actor named John Krasinski, who hosted a virtual prom for the class of 2020 who was missing theirs. And that's it. That's all you should need to know about the coronavirus pandemic.